And I've always said, like, make sure that your journal is working for you, that you're not working for your journal, because at that moment when that happens, you will immediately stop.
Hey, I'm Becca with the Happy Ever Crafter, and in this episode, I'm talking to Mark from Men Who Bullet. And despite the way his Instagram handle makes it sound, this is not just a lesson for men. Mark is walking us through a lesson on no-fluff bullet journaling, which I think is going to be so refreshing for anybody like me who got paralyzed by the thought of building a bullet journal, but having to make it all beautiful and pretty all the time. Mark is giving us his, again, no-fluff approach, and I think you're all really going to enjoy it. So let's jump right in. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have you here. I don't know how I hadn't discovered, I think I did discover you a long time ago, and I was like, I should really have him on the show. And then it took us this long to get you on here, but I'm super pumped we finally did.
Well, I'm honored.
Before we jump into me asking you a bunch of questions, can you give us a little rundown of who you are, what you do, all that kind of stuff? Because I know your account, but I don't actually know you as a person. So I want some of the background stuff.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I'll give you I usually talk for long periods of time, and I'm like, when do I stop talking about myself? So my name is Mark, and I do run the Instagram and YouTube and all of the social medias for Men Who Bullet. I am a bullet journaler. I've been doing it for almost 5 years. I actually started my Instagram account the same day that I went all in for bullet journaling. A friend of mine had told me about it probably 6 or 7 years ago. And I remember the first time I looked at it and I was like, what? Like all these, icons and signifiers and all of this. I'm just trying to remember the things I have to do every single day. I don't know about all of that. And so I was using a bunch of different products. I was a big digital planner, and I don't say really a planner, I'll say more of a digital note taker. So I used Evernote for a really long time, but I wasn't getting anything out of it. I mostly use my bullet journal now, and even back then for work. So by day and by night also recently, I'm a designer. I actually manage a design team of UX designers, graphic designers, content strategists for a company here in the Maryland area where I live. And I love that space, and it's super fun. And it's funny because people are like, well, you're in the digital space, but yet you do everything analog. And I was like, well, for me though, this works because I'm always looking at it. I always have it with me. It's back there, especially when I was at work versus working remote now. That was my thing in my hand.
Okay. So I debated touching on this at all because it's 2020 and there aren't things now that are that's for women and that's for men. But let's be honest, bullet journaling is very much a female dominated space. And yes. I'm just so curious, I have a take on it, but I'm curious on what your take on it is, because bullet journal was invented by a man. Mm-hmm. And it's just funny to me that it got taken over by women. And it's this crazy thing that I feel like there's a weird barrier now for men to join. And I'm curious what your take mm-hmm. is on that.
No, absolutely. So, the entire reason that I started my account in the first place was because I wasn't seeing a lot of other guys that I could get inspiration from. There was a handful, Matt, who he is huge on YouTube. Raglan, I believe is his last name, right? I'm not good with last names, but
I've met him. He's at a conference. Yeah, he's great.
Oh my gosh. So he was the first person that I found that was even talking about bullet journaling. There was a handful of people who were on YouTube at the time who were doing it, but that wasn't everything that they did. It was kind of like, hey, I have a vlog and I also bullet journal. I thought that was cool. And then I went into Instagram and Pinterest, as I think most people usually do, right? They just type in bullet journaling or something along the lines, and then you get
so overwhelmed.
And it's just all the things. And the first thing you see is usually Ryder Carroll, bulletjournal.com, and you start to go through that. But then you want to see things a little bit more visual to really understand what this is. And then that's when you start to go a little bit deeper in there. So the reason I think that guys tend to not show a lot of their stuff. There's a lot of guys who bullet journal who just don't post on Instagram or social media. And I hear from a lot of those people. I talk to a lot of them are like, hey, I'm starting this, but I don't post my stuff. Do I have to bullet journal? And that is funny to me, right? But I always tell them you don't have to show anybody this if you don't want to. This is really for you. I think what probably happens with a lot of people is that they go and they see those very creative pages that get created and they go, that's bullet journaling. That I have to be able to be an artist. I have to be able to doodle. I have to be able to draw. I have to have all that stationery to even start. And I think that's probably what throws off a lot of people. For guys specifically, I don't know necessarily if I talk to a lot of them, it's different, because some people that I see that are bullet journal or even planning, it's hard to describe, because I'm the same way. Like, it feels weird to give a gender to a non-gendered thing, right? So I
Totally. And
just
it's
look
like
at it.
it's a super stereotype to say that guys wouldn't want to do those fancy ones, because I'm sure there are lots who do, but you
There
just don't
are.
see as many.
You don't, exactly. So I think it's probably a mix of two things. I think one, it might be, being nervous about sharing those things, or not feeling like it's pretty enough to put out there, or cool enough. I know I go through that constantly, where I'm like, this doesn't look like anyone else's stuff that I'm seeing out there. But for me, it works, and for others, it does too. I think also, I think also it's just a level of just, being comfortable in sharing and doing that, whether it's something that, subconsciously you're like, well, this is more of a female dominated space versus a male dominated space. Therefore, I don't want to like mix in there because I'm not going to be successful. I think if you look at it from that perspective, then you're just automatically starting with nothing.
Well, I just as you're talking, I just had sort of like, I answered my own question in my head, because it's like, it goes hand in hand that guys would tend to make it more functional, less fluff, like you're going to talk about today, which means that it's by nature not as like pretty to look at. And the whole point of posting on Instagram or posting a photo is that it's attractive to look at, and that people would be like drawn to looking at it. Whereas like,
Yeah.
if you're just doing it for function, there's no point in posting a picture. So maybe there are a ton of guys, and it clearly, like if you've talked to a bunch of them, there are lots who are doing it. There's just no point in posting it because they use it for function. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's like,
And
there we go.
And that's exactly it. And I mean, my demographics look very different than some of my other friends. I pay attention to those things because they are important. But like right now, I have like a 27% male to female, following on Instagram right now. And for most people, that is very different. Like theirs are even smaller than that. And I'm sure for me, it's because I'm a guy. So maybe people are finding that connectivity there. But what I found for myself over time is that there's a lot of great work out there. And so what I did recently, I just said, I guess I'm more like minimalistic and functional in my design. And there's an entire community out there of people who are doing exactly that. They use one pen and their notebook, and that is it. But they are making some amazing looking designs. So they're pulling in patterns and other designs and drawings to add to that page. But yeah, if you break it down, like bullet journaling at its purest form is not a visual, it's not a visual program. It is all about efficiency and productivity and knowing what you have to do and getting it done. Like that's what it is. So when you add the layer of design or artistry on top of it, it's a little bit of like a hot topic in the community, but like I call it like creative journaling or creative bullet journaling. Like that's what it is. There's amazing artists that are out here in this community that are focused on using different types of mediums. And that's so cool. And they're adding it to their bullet journal and they're using it. Like I love After the Pens because that to me is proof that like you're actually using your bullet journal, one, and then two, that it actually works for what you're doing. And everyone has a different need. Like I need space because I use mine for work. I have, I'm in probably like 6 out of the 8 hours of my day, I'm in some type of a meeting with some person. I need notes. I have a lot of tasks and things I'm doing throughout the week. So if I were to add a lot of extra decoration or fluff, like we said right now, not to like belittle it, it's just like, I need the space. Therefore I can't add a lot of that extra in there. Then that's just how you have to roll.
Yeah, I remember when I first started getting into it, being so overwhelmed by the like fanciness aspect and doing the decorations and having like all these like really impressive looking spreads. And
Yeah.
I literally was paralyzed by it because I thought like, well, if I'm going to bullet journal, I'm going to have to share a picture of these and like whatever.
Sure.
But you, like you said earlier, you don't have to share a picture of it. But at the same time, I remember thinking like, as I got into the nitty gritty of like how it works, I remember thinking this is so helpful and so genius for so many people, but people will get paralyzed and stopped by the fancy aspect of it. So I'm super excited for your lesson because you're going to do the no fluff version. I think a lot of people will benefit from it. But I just want to like, as you're talking, you're saying like that a lot of, men get paralyzed by it or want to do a functional aspect, or they're they don't want to post a picture because they feel like it's supposed to be prettier. I remember specifically when I had first started, I went for lunch with a friend, and I had started bullet journaling recently, and so did he. So we both brought our journals, and I showed him mine. And then I remember him being like, I don't want to show you, like, I really like bullet journaling, but I don't want to show you mine because it's not nice like yours. And I was like, I don't care. It's like the functionality of it is so cool. And so anyway, that's like a side story, but I specifically remember that moment because I was like, it's not about it being like, I like making mine pretty, but I still am making it super functional. And now when people say like, you know, can I see your bullet journal? I'm like, yeah, sure. But it's not really a bullet journal. Like I've made it so much mine now that, like you said, it's a creative journal. So,
it is. And I have the same thing. I mean, when I'm at work and I would have these meetings, I would just open up my weekly spread and I was like, it's functional. Like I focus a lot on grids. I focus a lot on just kind of like what I need out of it. And that's what we'll talk about in just a minute. But the same thing, like they'll look at that and it'll just be like a square with like dashed lines through it, like nothing crazy. And they're like, that's so cool. Like I could never do that. And same thing, friends of mine who are planners and bullet journalers, but like not kind of in that space. I've had the same conversations and I was like, I'm not even looking at that. I'm looking at how you're utilizing it. Like what ways is it helpful for you that I can learn from? Because it's not do it all day long. Like people who like yourself who are like great at lettering, like I try to incorporate that because it's something I want to get better at. It's not beautiful, it's not perfect, but I've learned a lot from others in this space that have helped me like explore. And that's how I look at my bullet journal too. I went into it saying like, here's what I need from it. I want to make sure that I can get my stuff done because I was constantly forgetting things that were just lost in email. I wanted to focus on grids and I want to focus on lettering, and specifically because I'm a lefty. And everything online is pretty much like, if you're a right-handed person, here's how you do it. And I was like, yeah, but what about for our smudgers out there who are writing and literally like taking the ink with us as we travel? But it was helpful for me to like learn something new. And so every now and again, I'll add it in there, or I'll do faux calligraphy because I'm just not feeling it that day, you know? But it really is about what you want to get from it. And I think that's I think even Ryder Carroll will say that himself, right? Like it is about yourself and kind of self-development through journaling. And if you want to use that to just track your daily tasks, awesome. If you want to use it as a daily gratitude log, fantastic. Like please don't get paralyzed or feel like you're doing, you have to do over-designed work to work in it. And I've always said, like, make sure that your journal is working for you, that you're not working for your journal. Because at that moment, when that happens, you will immediately stop because you're like, this is too much work. Like, it shouldn't be that hard. And that is, I always remind myself, if I'm even coming close to something where I'm feeling like overdone by it, there's sometimes where like, I'll plan over the weekend and get something ready for the next day. And there's times where I'm going into my first meeting at 9 o'clock and I haven't done anything. And so I just like, nope, today is a organic week. We are not using rulers. We're not using markers. We're using one pen and I'm just going. And sometimes those are the best weeks.
Yeah, for sure. I'm like that too. And I've had people say to me before, like, isn't setting all of that up so much work? And I'm like, yes, but I don't mind doing it because it works so well for me. And it's to the point where doing that work ends up being enjoyable. Anyway, that's a whole other topic. I want to get into your lesson because I know it's going to be so helpful for people. So maybe I'll take my face off and let you flip your camera onto your hands and then we'll come back after.
Let's go. Yeah. Let's go ahead and do it.
Awesome. So before we go ahead and get started with some of the designs that we're going to talk about today, I thought I would just do a real quick brief overview of bullet journaling and what it is. So if you're not familiar, it's a method that Ryder Carroll set up and created. And it's really an analog way of note-taking and reflecting on your day-to-day and what's going on. And what I'll do real quick is talk about the parts and what you'll need to get started with bullet journaling and some of the key features of the bullet journal method. But if at any point you want to go in deeper or you want to learn more about bullet journaling after this, I recommend going to bulletjournal.com to watch those videos and everything you'll need to get up and running. But the first thing you need with a bullet journal is a notebook. And there's a lot of different types out there, and I thought I would just go through a handful quickly, just of some that I've used. This was my very first bullet journal that I started in April of 2017. It's a Lecturum. It was the one that I saw being used the most online when I started bullet journaling, so I thought, let me go ahead and get one of those and check it out. And it was a good bullet journal to start with because it already had an index kind of set up inside of here, and I'll go over what an index is in just a minute. It also had page numbers on here, which are important for the index, and it had the dot grid, which is exactly what I was looking for myself to get started. And I've explored a lot inside of this one. This was all about learning and making mistakes and trying new things, and well, I still do that today, to be very honest with you, but it was a great place to start. And then after I went with that one, I've tried a few other ones just to show you some examples. This is Exceed, which is actually a brand from Walmart. They have these great notebooks at a really affordable price. The dot grids are inside of here. Not all of them have page numbers. Not all of them have indexes and things set up inside of them. But if you're looking for an inexpensive notebook to get started with, it's a great option. There's some other great options out there like this Archer and Olive. It's one of my last ones. It's very heavily used, but hardcover. But the paper is 160 GSM, which means it's very thick, and there's no ghosting or bleeding with any markers, most markers I'll say, that you would use inside of here. But what happens with that is you get a thicker notebook here versus something like this that might be a little bit thinner. But there's just so many different options out there for you with different textiles, different types of pages and things that you might get. And if you don't really know what you want to do just yet, I always say go with what you already have. This is a really great example of a quick notebook that I got from a conference from MailChimp, for instance. And there's a dot grid inside of here. And I could easily use this to get up and running inside of a bullet journal. So don't feel as if you need a certain notebook or a certain type or spend a certain amount of money on it yet, especially if you're not sure how you're going to use it or if you're brand new to it. Use something you already have. I think when I first got started or was even trying to understand the basic concepts of it, I started an aligned journal and was just like, okay, after I felt okay with it, then I bought myself a journal and said, okay, I'm gonna actually stick with this thing. Let me go ahead and invest a little bit and make it happen. So feel free to use whatever works for you. So the first thing that you'll set up inside of your bullet journal will be your index. I call this the brain of the bullet journal. And the reason that I do that is that everything that you'll put inside of your bullet journal needs to make its way back here to the index. And the way that you set this up is you leave some room on the left-hand side, where you'll put the page numbers. And then on the right-hand side, you'll put the topic of what's on that page. So that way, if you're ever looking for a note that you kind of lost, you know exactly where you can find that. So if I want to find a basic weekly, I know that I have that on page 11 and I can flip to that notebook. After you set up your index, the next thing that you'll set up will be your future log. And the future log is the thing that confused me the most at first when I started with my bullet journal because I wasn't quite sure of its purpose and its use. But I can tell you briefly and quickly, it is actually a really valuable part of your notebook because this is where all the future events go to. As you're working through month to month, you'll find as you're taking notes, you might get to the end of the week and think, oh gosh, I didn't do this task, or maybe it's not really important right now. What should I do with it? Should I keep moving it with me each week, even though I don't need to do it? No, you can actually put it back into your future log. And that way, as you set up your monthlies, you'll have these notes and these events and things on here that you can then bring back. So let's say I needed to get an oil change and I'm working in December, let's say, but I don't need to do it right away. I might move that note to January after I go through that week and say, okay, it's not something I need to do now, but I'm going to remind myself of it in the future. So when I get to January and set up that month, I know that it's a task that's going to happen. Once you have that set up, the very first thing you'll do next from there is set up your first monthly. And what your monthly is just an overview of your entire month. Over here on the left-hand side, this is the more traditional way to do it as taught by the bullet journal method. You put the month, you put the numbered dates of the month, and then also the day of the week next to it. And you just write out anything that might be here, a note or a task that you need to take a look at. You put any monthly tasks down here as well. Over on this side, this is just another way that you could do the same thing. It's just setting up a little bit more like a calendar. And you may say, well, Mark, I can buy a predated calendar that could do this. Absolutely. No one is saying that you have to do any certain way. You could still use a predated calendar or planner and still use the bullet journal method. It doesn't matter, but I just like to show some different options. So you have your index, you have your future log, you set up your monthly log. The next thing that you'll do is set up your weekly log. And this is really where all the action starts to happen, is that once you get that monthly and you understand what you need to accomplish, then you start your weekly. Now, the traditional way of doing a weekly is to put the month, you would put the month, and then you would put the day and the date. And then you start your rapid logging. And what rapid logging is just a quick way of taking notes and jotting down tasks as you're going throughout your day and your meetings. And so you'll start to use these signifiers in here. So like the bullet here, like we'll talk about in just a second, that's what the bullet journal method gets its name from, is a task. Make a haircut appointment for Friday. And then once I complete that task, you would exit out like you see here. If I'm taking down notes, I'm going to put a little dash here and just write the note. It's not an action, maybe something I need to reread or remind myself of later. You can even do this with nesting those type of tasks together with like a grocery list or any kind of notes that you need. So the next thing I wanted to talk about real quick is what it means when we start to say no fluff bullet journaling, because there's really, in my mind, there's a lot of different versions of bullet journaling out there. There is what I like to call the purest way, and that's a really no frills. You are following that method point by point, nothing's changing. You're doing exactly what writer teaches you, and that's it. And that's totally cool, and that works for a lot of people. There's also creative bullet journaling, and that's where you're going to see more of the art, the doodles, the painting, the designs, the stickers, all of those things that, in my opinion, sometimes throw people off from getting started with the bullet journaling because they think that that is bullet journaling, the extra design you put on top of that is. And it's not. That's just each individual person's expression of interest. For me, I really like grids and I like clean lines, and that's when you'll get into kind of my genre, which I'll call like minimalistic and functional, because I use my bullet journal mostly for work. So I need it to be open and functional, and it needs to work for me. I need room for notes and tasks and all of those things. So what I like to do, and you'll see in just a moment, I like to expand on the foundations a little bit. So I'm not a purist, because you'll see very soon that I like to really kind of broaden myself from there. I like to look at weeks all at one time. I like to track things like my sleep, or if I'm actually exercising or not, or any type of thing that I'm interested at that point or that I really need to focus on. I like to put that into my week. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and open this up and start to talk about my approach and how I tackle bullet journaling. Before we move into the actual design though, let me just open up to the page to get started. I do want to talk about materials. So as I mentioned, the most important part is a notebook and a pen. You can get any type of pen. I personally use the Uniball Signo DX in one of the fine points. That's my personal preference. I've liked this pen. It's been my daily driver for years now. I've got a whole box of them over here in case I start to run out or lose them. But if you're into fountain pens or you're into using a pencil instead, you can use whatever you want. For today's purposes, I'm going to use a pencil. I'll use my regular gel pen. I am also going to use one of these Pitt Artist pens from Faber-Castell. The reason I like these or any type of fine liner is because you can draw your lines in here without having to worry about smudging because it dries really fast. You don't necessarily need something like this. I personally am just going to use it today because I like it. If you have a pencil, you need some type of an eraser, so I always have that. My favorite ruler, and this is because the way that I like to design uses a lot of straight edges. I like a clear ruler, that way I can see through it and I can see the dots as I'm working. And the last thing I'm going to use today is just going to be a highlighter. So what we're going to do today is set up, maybe we'll do like 2 different types of approaches to some weekly designs that I like. So let's go ahead. The first thing we'll do here is we're actually going to set up just a 1-pager. This is something, it's kind of like a go-to of mine that I've used for a while. I just wrote it out here on another sticky note real quick of what we want to try to achieve with this. So at the top here, I'll just have a header so I know what month it is. And then all I'm going to do is actually break this page vertically in half and then horizontally into thirds. And then what this will give me a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then a weekend. All right, so as you can see, I just have these 6 spaces here. Now, because I'll build these out in pen when I get there, I'm actually going to just kind of save these 2 end spots here, so 2 of these squares over, because I'm gonna put the date over here on the right-hand side. Up here at the top, I know that's my center, I'm just going to write in just November real quick, just to give myself orientation to where I am. So now that I have this set up, this is where I actually come in with my pen. So you can either do that with your ink pen or your gel pen. I'm going to use the Pitt Artist pen here. And then over here, I'll just real quick go over top of where I put in November. The headers are also really good places where you might want to be practicing your lettering. Maybe you're learning how to hand letter, do calligraphy, or some cool different fonts. It's a really fun way to explore while keeping the rest of your page relatively easy and functional. So I'll go ahead and grab my pen now, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write in the headers for each of these. All right, so this gives me an entire week at a glance. For me, myself, this is how I like to work. I like to be able to see everything going on. If I want to set something up in advance, or I know I have a big meeting come up, when I start to plan my week, I'll usually add them in here. Even if it ends up getting canceled, I can always draw a line through it, and that way I know it's not there. But this is a really great way for me to get started. Now for myself, even though I'm not doing any kind of over design here, I do still like to add a little bit. And this is why, for myself personally, I wanted to get a few things out of bullet journaling. I wanted to first get myself organized, make sure I knew what I was doing, when I was expected to do it, and what I had coming up. The second thing I really wanted to focus on was grids and laying things out. I'm a designer by trade, so these are things that I'm usually thinking about anyway, and I like the way they look. And then the other thing I wanted to actually focus on was just detail. Learning how to add small elements to pages that help it stand out a little bit. So in this case, what I'm going to do is just use my highlighter, and I'm just going to highlight where I'm going to put the number dates of the week. Then the next thing I'm going to do under here is add just a small drop shadow. And this is just something I've learned over time. I probably saw from someone else online, and I tried it out. And all you're going to do is just draw a small little rectangle underneath the bottom, and then up a little bit on the right hand side and pull it over. And then what we're going to do, and you could do two different things here. You could either go in with a color, maybe black or gray, and add a slight little drop shadow to kind of help elevate this. Or what I'm going to do is actually just draw some slanted lines underneath of here. And this is just a really nice and easy way to use a minimal amount of tools. Even if I wasn't using the Pit Artist pen for those bolder lines, I could still just use my pencil or my pen. And this would only really need to have, you know, a pen and piece of paper if you didn't want to use a marker or another color on top of it. All right, and just by adding just a few extra lines and a few other dashes, you can see how this starts to just elevate it just ever so slightly. And this is all I'm going to do for it. So if you're looking for a nice weekly, you don't have to do that extra step. You can keep it really straightforward. And again, I like a nice overview. And then usually what I do in this case is I would have this page over here for my weekly overview, and then I would leave this whole page for rapid logging and notes. Or if I wanted to, I could just keep them underneath here. It all depends on how much you think you need within a week. So now that we did this page, I'm going to flip the page over, and we're going to do something a little bit more advanced from this. So something else that I do, as you saw, I will often use Post-it notes when I'm doing something here, but if I'm kind of going to the next level or I'm really trying to think through a design, I will spend a little bit more time on a page. As I mentioned, everyone needs different things from their bullet journal. Some people simply need to have tasks and notes, and that's all that they need to worry about. For me, because I use this a lot for work, I also focus on other things and habits that I'm trying to track. And that could be any number of things. That could be just times that I'm getting up to walk. That could be books that I'm reading. That could be things like sleep tracking even. I've always pay attention to things like that. So I like to sometimes include them in my weeklies just to make sure that I'm paying attention. So what we're going to do for this next one is think through how we are going to do a weekly overview. We also need a lot of room for notes. We're also going to track the following week, and we're going to track sleep and exercise. And you would say to me, Mark, that's a lot of stuff to get onto a page. And I would agree with you, it can be a lot. But for me, I just want to show you how you can still create a really cool looking bullet journal or something like that without having to go overboard, but it's still really helpful for maybe tasks or goals that you're going to do. So what I'm going to do here is just kind of lay this out here. I'm going to grab my go-tos. I'm going to grab my pencil. So here's what I'm thinking my approach will be. I want to show you how I would do a full page spread. So as I mentioned before, if I do that, I'll usually break this vertically into 3 columns. So what I'll do is just draw 3 squares up here, and that'll just let me know that I want to create that space. And I'm going to do the same thing across here because I love symmetry. Then what I'll do here, and that takes out the weeklies. Notes, I need a lot of room for notes. So what I'll do is I'll probably just draw a straight line across, and then I'm going to make this whole left-hand section notes. And on this page, I'm talking like, it's probably going to be about like this much space of notes. So that, you know, kind of creates 2 columns for me if I need to worth of notes. Then I want to focus on next week's sleep and then my exercise. So what I'll do over here is maybe I'll break this in half, and I'll use this side for next week. And then over on this side is where I'll put my tracker. So we'll do exercise and then sleep. Let's try it out. And this is, again, how I usually take a look at my weeks. Before I even touch my bullet journal, sometimes I just like to think out on paper, what are the things that are most important to me that week? And then I'll usually do a quick sketch just to kind of think through how I might do that. And over time, as you do this, you'll actually find patterns. I've used these layouts over and over again. Even the one that we just did here, this could easily be any number of things, because all it is foundationally really is just, you know, 3 columns split in half. So if you wanted to use something else, stickers or anything else, you absolutely could. If you wanted to draw on here, do hand lettering here, you can do whatever you want. You could even actually put boxes around here. It's all about just finding good patterns that work for you and also layouts that work for you and then bringing them back in. So let's go ahead and break up these pages real quick. I know just out of experience that if I want to turn these into 3 columns, then I need to break this page into 8 squares across and I have 1 gap in between. Real quick, I just wanted to show you another handy thing that I actually created in my other bullet journal. This is my current one that I'm using right now, but in the back of this notebook, I actually created a resource page for myself that has all of the grids already kind of mapped out for me. Now, because this is square, it's a different shape, I needed a little bit of different spacing here, but I just went in and actually just split out my page so I can easily reference what I would need to create those pages for myself. This is such a time saver for me, because if I know that I just need to split a page in half and I need to do 3 column rows, I already have all the numbers written down here. So this might be something you want to look into. And I think for most people that have a standard size bullet journal, a lot of those also exist online. You can just look for line or grid setups for certain size bullet journals. All right, let's get back to this. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to count down 10 spaces here, and that will leave me plenty of room at the top, but a lot of room for notes as we talked about needing before. And then what I usually do here, we'll just kind of draw out the lines and kind of eyeball out what I'm going to need. I say eyeball, but what I mean by that is just following these lines here just to help me out. And then what I'll do is go in with my ruler and then just start to line those out a little bit. And then I'll come over here and I'll do the same exact thing. Now for this page, what I'm going to do is I am going to completely box them in. All right, so then once I have my top, I'll go ahead and what I'm going to do is just give myself 2 squares down for that header. And that's where I'll put either the day and the date of the week. I might do it in a different way versus just print. Kind of opens me up for that. And actually what I'll do over here on this last one is, and the last one, in that last page, I did the weekend, but if you wanted to turn this into 2 days during the week, a Saturday and a Sunday, since we are breaking these up into 10, I know that I could have each of these be 5 squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I would put this across here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so I can do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then a Saturday and a Sunday. Now, if you needed these to be larger, make them larger. It's completely up to you, however you wanted to set this page up. Then what I'll do next is just save a little bit of space here, and then I'm just going to draw a straight line across here. And what this does is just help me visually separate the top area from the bottom area. So over here, what I'll do is I'm just going to write in notes. All right, so what I'll do now is just use this line, and I'm just going to go all the way straight down. And what I'll do is I'm only going to track Monday through Friday for that week. So if I did all my math correctly here, then what I should have is 25 of these squares left, and then I'll just break them up into 5 as I'm going along. All right, so that'll be for the following week. So this will be this week here, and then I'll just put Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday here. And again, for me, this is because I'm using this for work, so I would only really need to worry about the future events that might be happening next week for work. Now, if you took the free lettering class, this is going to look probably a lot better than it does here, but I'm just going to sketch that in here real quick. So for exercise, the way I'm going to focus on this for myself personally is look at it from a standpoint of how much time I'm exercising each day during the week. So I know that I have those 12 spaces over here. So I'll probably just break it out into increments of 15 minutes, let's just say. And then I'm just going to write the days of the week here. And then what that'll do for me is on Monday, I can just track maybe with a bar or even a dot and a line how many minutes I am working out in that day. All right, so I'll just do right here and just start with Monday. The next thing I'm going to do is sleep, and I'll just use the space that's right below this. The way that I like to track sleep, honestly, is in a very similar way. I like graphs and charts like that. So what I'll do is just utilize this space over here. And because I have 12 lines, I'm going to shoot, I don't know that I'd ever get 12 hours worth of sleep, but you never know. And then what I'll do is I'll just write in the sleep header here. And then what I like to do here is just a similar thing to what we did here, Monday through the weekend. And then what I'll do here, instead of this being tracked vertically, I'll just track this horizontally based off of how much sleep I'm getting each one of those days. All right, now that we have all of these pieces here, what I'll do is what I did before is just take the pen and just go over top of my lines here, because with this, even though that took a few minutes to try to set up, now I'm all set and ready to go. I don't have to recount anything, any type of lines or whatnot, and I can just kind of go for it. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like all filled in. All right, so now we have this all set up here, and the last little details that I'm going to go through here just kind of finish out the rest of this piece. They don't have to be exact. I'm just adding some dashed lines here for me so that I know when I'm hitting my certain marks. And then the last thing that I have to do here would just be putting the days of the week on here. So for this, I'll just use a different style of text. If you want to get fancy about it, please do. But for me, I like to keep it relatively straightforward. And one thing I like to do in here, it's not really a trick, it's just a different way to make your regular handwriting look a bit different, is by doing a large letter and then a small letter right next to it. So let me show you, like Monday, I would do like a big M and a little O, a big N, a little D, a big A, a little Y, and it just kind of gives it a cool little different look here. I write in all caps, so sometimes my handwriting can look a little boring here. So doing something like this just helps give it an extra level of what I think looks cool. All right, so now that we have our entire page here, the next thing that I would do with this is just take my eraser and go over top of everything here. All right, and there we have a different approach to a weekly. This gives me a weekly overview of everything that's going on in that week. I can then also add notes for the following week if I need to. I can track my exercise and I can track my sleep, and it leaves me plenty of room for notes over here. So these are just two examples of ways that you can approach your bullet journal and take a look at weekly overviews. The notes become really important. Your future log becomes really important because you'll be porting things over month to month, and each week you can come up with some different designs and things that you like. So that's my approach to my bullet journal. So hopefully you found some things in here that can be pretty helpful.
Okay, so first thing I have to bring up about your lesson is that you seriously blew my mind with your use of sticky notes, because I don't know if that's like just like a really simple thing that I always overthought, but I've never used sticky notes. And I remember when I got started, like I said, I was paralyzed to start writing in the journal. So I would have like, I'd have my journal here, and then I'd have a scrap piece of like full printer paper, and I would start doodling on it. But using sticky notes to do that and bringing it with you as you go is just so genius.
I mean, I probably saw it somewhere else, but I'm in the same boat of like trying to remember what's helpful. One thing I don't think that I really like, I didn't hit on it, but like I usually will say like, I don't like to skip pages. When I first started, I was like, well, I don't like ghosting. I'll just throw that out there. Like I'm not a big fan of it. I like a nice, like clean sheet of paper that I can start on, especially with adding certain things. And so another thing that I would start to do is I actually had a sticky in the front of probably the last 3 notebooks where I used to write down the page numbers that I would skip, because I come back to them for notes. Like if I need like a full like spread for a week, and I ended on like one of those even pages, I would just like skip that page, but then use it for notes. So I also would just have sticky notes taped in the front of my notebook that do the same exact thing.
The other thing, I didn't want to interrupt you while you were talking, but how good is that Uniball Signo DX black pen? So good. Like, and the best like, part,
I'm not joking where I say like, I keep boxes of these.
I have them too.
Like,
and the best part
I like
is
them
like,
because of the fine point.
Yes, they're so, like I tried a lot when I first started bullet journaling, and that one, as soon as I used it, I was like, amazing. And the best part about that is that, you know, the story I told you earlier about my friend who was scared to show me his bullet journal.
Yeah.
At that exact same lunch we had, he was like, Becca, have you ever tried this pen? And he was so nonchalant about it. And I was like, no, give it to me. And I tried, and I was like mind blown. And he's like,
and you kept it.
He was like, I've never seen somebody get so obsessed with a pen. He's like, take it with you. And I bought like 500 more.
I always recommend them. They're always with me.
Yeah. And I don't know if you're, I mean, I think you're probably as nerdy as I am about pens, but it also just, there's this thing sometimes that happens where if you use a certain pen, your writing is just automatically a little bit nicer. Like, I don't know what it is, but there's some pens that I just write and I'm like, that is not my writing. And I just like toss it. But this one is like, oh, this is like an accurate representation of my writing. Like, I love it. So nerdy.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like I actually have like even more fine point. I think it's like a 0.28 like fine tip pen, and I write with that. And while I love how fine it is, I feel like it's finding that gauge, because I know some people who write with like a 1, right? And like it's big, bold, and beautiful. And I was like, oh, that looks so good. But I write with it, and I feel like I'm like a child with like a big crayon, like writing across my page. So it does make a difference. I mean, that's why I always say like try different pens and see what works. But yeah, that's a really good one.
Okay, Mark. So this has been like a super long but super awesome episode. So I think we should wrap it up. But before we do, can you tell everybody where they can find you? Because I know you have so many other resources people will enjoy and all that kind of stuff.
No, absolutely. So I'll say for my main ones, definitely Instagram. So just instagram.com/menwhobullet. YouTube is also, I've really been trying to focus a lot more on there recently and bring content and this grill to you. Before it was all just my hands back in the day, but hopefully you don't mind the face now. But youtube.com/menwhobullet. And I'm also around there in other places. You know, I tried the TikTok train for a little bit, and I mean, I like it. I'll spend hours on TikTok for content creation. There's some stuff there. But I would say that the heaviest two really are YouTube and Instagram.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for coming on. I think not just men, but everybody is going to get a lot of value out of this, because it's going to stop people from being so paralyzed by bullet journaling. And yeah, I mean, I feel like we'll have to have like a 2.0 later someday. I just need you to like put your camera on your hands and just flip through all of your bullet journals, because I want to see them. But maybe that's like sometime you and I will meet in real life and I'll do that.
Oh my gosh, I hope so. And thanks so much for not just inviting me. It's amazing. Like when you reached out, I was like starstruck, because I've just been such a fan of you for such a long time. But also, I just want to say just thank you for putting the positivity out there in the world. I was participating in the quarantine chalk challenge that you were doing with my kids, and we really just had so much fun with doing that. So just a thanks to you also, because you know we all needed some happiness. We still need it now. So I just always appreciate what you're bringing out there. So thanks for having me here, and thanks for chatting with me, and thank you for what you do as well.
Thanks, Mark. That's really nice.